There's a very large police presence here to the left. A number of officers have been here throughout the day. And speaking of police, an officer tells me this protest actually started on September 1st by a group of 9 people, and now it's grown to more than 1,000. A wall of police officers stand guard on Wall Street as thousands of protesters flock to the heart of the financial district to have their voices heard.
Banks got bailed out, we got sold out. Banks got bailed out, we got sold out.
I'm pretty frustrated. I thought we voted for change in 2008. Obviously, we didn't get that.
A number of these protesters say they're fed up with high unemployment and the nation's current economic situation.
Also, we're here in solidarity with everyone around the globe right now, from Egypt to Greece to everywhere else where they're out in the streets, and they're not going to take it anymore. They're not going to have their lives bartered away by people in offices that have nothing to do with their lives.
Protest organizers say people from a large spectrum of political affiliations are represented at this weekend's event, an event some say will last through the week to come.
I've talked to a lot of people who vote strictly Republican that are here. I've talked to Tea Party members. I've talked to people who vote Democrat, and then just, black bloc anarchists. There's everybody in between.
Meanwhile, a heavy police presence has been seen all day and will remain throughout the night, just in case anything gets out of hand. At this point, the protests have been peaceful. The NYPD says they haven't arrested anyone, and as of now, it's still unclear if the police will allow protesters to stay here at Zuccotti Park. We will be on the story and bring the latest as it becomes available.
We're gonna shut down Wall Street!
America's attempt to follow the example of the Arab Spring.
The banksters' fraud continues now, with bonuses obscene. America, America, how Wall Street shit on thee.
Social media had been abuzz with this planned occupation of Wall Street for months.
What do we want? Revolution! When do we want it? Now!
Up to 20,000 people were supposed to spill out onto the streets of the Big Apple's financial district. But not more than 1,000 of the most fed-up Americans showed up.
I've got my sleeping bag and my pad. Told not to bring a tent, so I left that at home.
Ben flew in from out of state to camp out here day and night. He has a simple message for the U.S. president.
He's just backed out of everything he promised in the campaign, so it's like he's asking to lose the next election.
Wall Street greed and corruption and the lack of accountability that followed brought these Americans to the brink.
This is just the beginning of occupying Wall Street. These crowds say they're going to be here until their demands are heard inside the offices of the Wall Street skyscrapers.
Over 46 million people are living in poverty in the U.S., with 14 million unemployed. Much of this triggered by the shameless gambling of Wall Street CEOs.
Wall Street's looking a little different this weekend. More than 2,000 protesters from all over the country gathered in Lower Manhattan to join the Occupy Wall Street movement.
A protest on Wall Street. Police quickly set up barricades near the New York Stock Exchange after hearing about the protest plans on Twitter. Some people called it the United States Day of Rage. According to organizers, the idea was to camp out for weeks, even months possibly, as an expression of anger over the financial system they say favors the rich and powerful. At least 2 people were arrested.
Most U.S. cable networks only briefly mentioned the event, and the Wall Street Journal had no coverage as of Sunday afternoon. But Russian news outlet RT went in depth. A protester told the network the group's anger was targeted at Wall Street fat cats.
When the top 1% of wealth in this country controls political decisions, when the money that comes straight out of banks goes to bonuses instead of taking care of some of the problems that we need, and that same money goes to pay for the politicians that make those decisions, people should be damn annoyed.
The Think Progress website concedes debates about the tactics and strategies behind an anti-Wall Street campaign might be warranted. While many of the conservative defenders of Wall Street may be quick to portray protests as driven by envy of its wealth or far-left ideologies, the truth is that people have a very simple reason to be angry, because Wall Street's actions made tens of millions of people dramatically poorer through no fault of their own. The protest organizer Adbusters expects this campaign to be like the Tahrir Square moment of the Arab Spring. The site has a link to a live stream of the event on its website, but CNN has questions about the impact.
CNN Money's Julianne Pepitone was in the middle of it today. She says the turnout fell way short of organizers' expectations. Anger at the U.S. financial sector boiling over on Wall Street today. Several hundred people packed into Bowling Green Park in Lower Manhattan for what they're calling an Occupy Wall Street demonstration. Organizers say they were inspired by the Arab Spring earlier this year, the mass uprisings in countries like Egypt, Tunisia, and Syria. CNN Money's Julianne Pepitone was in the middle of it today. She says the turnout fell way short of organizers' expectations.
The original call back in July from Adbusters magazine was asking for 90,000 people to show up. And a couple of weeks ago, they kind of downplayed that, asking for 20,000 people. But they certainly didn't get that kind of turnout today.
Before we let you go, what do they want?
Well, that's the interesting thing about this protest. They talk about we're going to demand something from Wall Street, but the demand is kind of being crowdsourced. The crowd is going to decide what the demand is. But of course, when you go by that line of thinking, everyone wants something different. The people I talked to said things as general as, you know, overthrow capitalism. Some had more specific things that they wanted President Obama to do. So finding a common voice with hundreds of people is something very difficult to do.
Well, protesters had planned to gather at the famous Bull statue on Wall Street, but police blocked the area off because they say none of the demonstrators had permits.
Another day of protest and more arrests on Wall Street today. At least 5 people were arrested as hundreds of people gathered to protest what they say is corporate greed. Eyewitness News reporter Sarah Wallace is live near Wall Street with more.
Cops hauled away this woman in handcuffs this afternoon. Her friends say she ignored a police order to stop writing on the sidewalk with chalk. The crowd taunted police, but there was no violence.
I believe that we will win.
That was also the case this morning, as several hundred, galvanized by an online movement called Occupy Wall Street, chanted and marched through the financial district.
We're hoping to clog up the streets, keep people from getting to work, and derail the financial system because it's not working for most of the people on this planet.
They didn't derail the system and never walked on Wall Street. Police set up barricades and limited access to residents and office workers who had to show ID.
I'm trying to get to my office. I don't want to be late for work, and I'm being blocked by this madness.
They say they're all about liberty for all, but there's little room now in the plaza for non-protesters.
You guys have basically taken over the park.
Right, so we feel like it's our home now.
How long are you going to stay in this?
We're hoping as long as we can, weeks to months, as long as we really create a social movement and come up with some demands to be achieved.
Police are only saying that anyone blocking pedestrian traffic will be arrested. The protesters say peaceful change is their message.
I'm personally here for my parents because they work so hard and they don't have a lot to show for that.
Back here now at Zuccotti Park, which is also known as Liberty Plaza, the corner of Liberty and Broadway. It is where the protesters have set up shop. They have their sleeping bags. They have their boxes of food as long as they do not set up tents. Police plan to leave them alone. Live from Lower Manhattan, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Sarah, thank you.
Talk about this and more with the New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. It's always good to have you. I always feel a little bit more secure when you're sitting here next to me in New York than maybe other times, Commissioner. But how worried should we be? The mayor is suggesting, you know, if the economic situation gets worse, there could be some rioting going on in big cities around the country.
We have the Occupy Wall Street demonstration going on right now. It started on Saturday. It's very peaceful, a couple of minor arrests, so far, so good.
Is that supposed to go on for a long time, or is that...
You're going to have to ask those folks, but I think there's been some statements that they intend to sleep in Wall Street, or at least in Lower Manhattan, for a period of time.
Do they have a permit for that? That's legal, I assume.
They had no permit. But they're going to sleep in public areas and not block the sidewalk. So if they adhere to the specifics of the law, there won't be a problem.
Are those big demonstrations, hundreds, 200, 500?
Well, it's come down quite a bit in size. It was about 1,000 people, I guess, on Saturday, but it's dwindled down to about 100 now.
You got more than 1,000 right here in New York City right now. More than 100, really, including the President of the United States. I had to walk many blocks because of what we call gridlock here in New York. How do you handle a situation like this? I know you do it every year, but it seems to be getting more intense every year.
It's a challenge, no question about it. We do have a lot of experience doing it. There's, I think, 137 heads of state are expected here at last.
And all of them have a little motorcade, they have security. You've got to coordinate.
Parts of Wall Street may be blocked off today. Hundreds of people demonstrated near New York's financial district this weekend. Money expert Jennifer Westhoven joins us. Okay, Jen, explain why these people are so upset who are demonstrating.
Oh, thanks, Natasha. I mean, they're really out there. They were beating on drums, saying that banks and companies have too much power, and they aren't taking care of the economy. Take a listen.
Wall Street, all day, all week, occupy Wall Street.
What kind of power? It's your classic protest video. The protests were organized by the activist magazine Adbusters. I've only ever seen it on the shelves at Whole Foods on your way out. People had hoped to rally around that famous bull statue that you see in the movies all the time, but police barricaded the sculpture. It's so popular, and Wall Street itself. So that means that people who need to go to work today may have to actually show their ID to get through some of those barricades. So far, everything has been.
Welcome back to The Five. So tomorrow is a big day for losers. Yeah, that's when some groups plan to stage a demonstration in New York City. An online group called Occupy Wall Street is calling for thousands of lefties to, quote, flood into Lower Manhattan, set up tents, and occupy it for a few months. Now, I got nothing against this. America is all about having your voice heard, no matter how stupid that voice may be. See The View. But two things get at my girdle. First, they say that, quote, once there, we shall incessantly repeat our one simple demand until Barack Obama capitulates. So what's that demand? Well, they'll let us know once they get the results of their Facebook poll. Yeah, supporters can vote on it from choices like revoke corporate personhood. I don't know what that means. Abolish capitalism. Bob wrote that. End wars. Close American military bases. And, of course, get a free shower. I'd actually get behind that one. But the worst part, how they say they're inspired by the Arab Spring protests. Let's remember, people were killed in Egypt, in Syria, in Yemen for something. Mentioning your little picnic in the same breath, relating it to the real risks those people took, should embarrass these twerps and their parents, who I imagine are probably embarrassed enough already. Hey, Bob, before I get to this, I want to know, you're sitting there with the Commie Manifesto. When somebody buys that book, do they get money for that? Or does that get redistributed to...
No, I think it goes to the Karl Marx Foundation for the Advancement of Civilization. Now, if I could just say something about this, it's easy to make fun of this Wall Street protest, but the fact is that these same people down there, none of whom went to jail, none of whom paid a penalty, have left people homeless. They've ruined their careers. They've ruined their 401ks and their retirement programs by selling fraudulent mortgages and fraudulent everything they could possibly think of to make a buck. Wall Street is so revered in this country. It is a dump. It is a place where people who rip people off, the average Americans, and they ought to be shut down.
So why did they put that in their Facebook poll?
Yeah, right.
You should be running the protest, Bob.
Somebody name me one single one of these bastards that ever gotten to jail.
I think these protesters are kind of wimpy. Wall Street on a Saturday. Have you ever been down there? No one's there. If they had some guts, they'd go down during the week and really protest when the bankers are around. But you know why?
There's too many Lamborghinis in the street then.
Yeah, right.
It's totally empty. It's like I Am Legend down there. Nobody's there but some zombies left over from the night before. And these guys, it's a joke. They just want to have a party. It's like their lame excuse of trying to have Burning Man or something, right?
Yoga,
it's a joke.
pitch tents, and dancing to Thriller.
Isn't
that awesome?
Downward dog.
I might go for that.
I would just say to my friends who are going to go do that, look, you ought to take it to East Hampton or the helicopter pads or the private jet areas where all these rich investment bankers who made money off of people's backs and their lives and their savings are off to their little summer homes.
Oh, you mean on the beach. You got to stop bashing the rich for a minute. I bash the hippies, you bash the rich.